Ladies and gentlemen, please give a round of applause to our grand finalists. Thank you. Today we have the motion. This House believes that the state should ensure the right to access the internet. And without any further ado, I'd like to welcome the Prime Minister to the podium.
The Human Rights Council is a United Nations body that monitors human rights progress and vulnerabilities all across all member countries. It has previously called the right to freedom and expression one of the essential fundamentation of a democratic society, and has recognized the Internet importance in the promotion and protection of right to freedom of opinion and expression. While access to the physical town square may not be human right in isolation, it has always been foremost inseparable from the right to associate and expression. So applying the same logic, internet access is inseparable from freedom of expression and is lesser spotted cousin, freedom of access to information. Moreover, I would argue that internet use may also fall within Article 8 ECHR, the right to family and private life, as email, Skype, Facebook, and Twitter are now essential tools of interaction between friends and family. A separate United Nations report called Internet Access a Human Right in June last year. Anyone from anywhere can drink of an infinite fountain of knowledge. In this debate, we have a few clarifications to make. First, we're not saying everyone should possess a high-tech quality computer. Rather, anyone should at least have a machine that has at least basic function to World Wide Web Internet. Second, we're not defending illegal action of Internet, nor saying that there's no situation at all that government can control Internet access to some extent. All rights have limitations. Third, if budget is such a big problem to some countries, we would like to set additional policies of having other democratic states or organizations like a UN to subsidize the extreme poor countries, because their role should be ensure democracy right. Fourth, but we do not want to debate on why should they have responsibility further on or how we're going to make it possible. The debate should rather be about why internet access can be regarded as a fundamental right in democracy. Fifth, we will define state as a democratic state. And sixth, we acknowledge the right to access to internet. It already exists, and the government wants to prove why this is so important. The government has a duty to ensure the right. We define right as unquestionable access of autonomy unless you did something illegal. We have burden of proof we will prove you today. First, why access to internet in the democracy can be regarded as a right. And second, why there are such necessary benefits that it should be a right. And this is also our stance. The right changes throughout time and included or excluded. This is not a fixed idea, even though we agree that there's a basic rights such as right to live and eat. In a society with high technology and where people's living are directly linked to information, we see the necessity, benefit, and we believe this is a right. We have three arguments for you today. First, internet is necessary for a better democracy. And second, benefit of having the system with massive information will be explained by me. And third, global democracy will be explained by our Deputy Prime Minister. First argument. Internet is necessary for a better democracy. Right to access the internet should be one of the essential foundation of a democratic society. We need democracy, and what good democracy is having a lot of good people participating in expressing their thoughts. We government believe the internet will help this, and in two ways. First, internet gives the biggest public discourse in the current status quo. Representation democracy is the realistic alternative we come up with because it was impossible to reflect all the people's opinion in the same time. Internet gives the unique opportunity to express their ideas and have the whole population see it never was possible throughout the history. The exposure to diverse opinion and ideas that the internet gives is close to the most ideal democracy. Second, it ensures right to freedom of opinion expresses in a democratic society. Every individual should have right to freedom of expression and opinion. We should not be blocked to say what I want to say because if I'm for or other don't like my opinion. Unfortunately, the status quo cannot afford this, and this is because there's two reasons. First, physical limitation. If you want to express your opinion, it shouldn't be merely just an idea by on their own. If not, it's not a right as freedom of expression. It's rather just keeping your idea to yourself. So most people don't. However, most people don't have access to many people, especially in developing countries. Transportation and technology limits. They cannot do that. Due to the fact that the internet is mobile and they have great accessibility. Since we can access it everywhere and anytime, it will provide people with high accessibility. Second, social pressure. Even if possible to show my opinion to other people, without the internet, it will be hard to endure right expression, because generally it's very hard to express an idea other to go against or dislike because of peer pressure. Peer pressure is not something that the children have, it's rather a social problem. Some people have the courage to explain themselves, but not much applied to many people. People go through a hard time express themselves freely, and even though they do, they can end up with discrimination and harassment. But by internet preventing this and give the opportunity to free expression, since it's anonymous, they don't have to worry about expressing about their thoughts. This system allows such improvement of democracy, and such beneficial factors should be acknowledged as right. Our second argument, and I have 2 points to support my second argument, benefit of having the system with massive information. We have more opportunity to information. Democracy is works best when the most citizens make their decision by themselves. And the more information we absorb, better cost and benefit analysis we can go through. So because we have more matter to compare and contrast, we will be able to have much better democracy. And internet will be able to provide this, and this will utilize. If we utilize this we will be able to have the democracy stronger than ever, and it will also break down the gap between rich and poor, which is a big social problem in the status quo. And in today's debate, I explained you 2 arguments why internet should be the necessary for a better democracy, and by making it a right, how can we benefit from it? Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Now I'd like to welcome the Leader of Opposition to the podium.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and ladies and gentlemen. As the leader of opponent, I would like to first make rebuttals about what the Prime Minister has stated. She first clarified the definition and the government's arguments, and there were the argument that there was the clarification that was they were not saying that they're acknowledging the illegal stuff that can happen because of the access on the internet. But we have to say something about this, because just ignoring this fact that because of the accessibility of the internet is allowed, and that can lead to a lot of illegal things on the internet, and just ignoring this would be ignorance, and it would lead. I think the government suggested it because they have no rebuttals to rebut against it. Also, they mentioned about the human rights to access human rights of accessibility on the internet, and they also mentioned that the state have the responsibility to protect those rights, but and they also mentioned developing countries, and I want to make my point there. Some developing countries which are so poor they don't even have the internet. We are not saying that, as they said, they don't need to have a high-tech technology internet stuff, but some developing countries, they don't even have very simple technology of internet. And in that country, in those case of country, still the democracy society can still be formed on that country.
Point, ma'am.
No, thank you. But they mentioned that this violating of the human rights of accessibility can lead to discrimination. But how would you explain the countries that are right now enforcing the no, thank you, ma'am, our democracy society, but still doesn't have accessibility to the internet? Also, we think that the accessibility to internet is not a human right. It's just a means. It's just a technology that enables the human rights, not the right itself. We rather consider it as a civil rights, and civil rights are very different from human rights because they are conferred upon us by law, not intrinsic to us as human beings. So, I think the government and the state has a responsibility to just restrict the people from the accessibility to the internet because of these reasons. And lastly, our deputy leader of opponent will talk about the other two points. Thank you.
Thank you, opposition leader. Now I'd like to welcome the Deputy Prime Minister to the podium.
Before we go on to our arguments, I want to clarify what the government is actually saying and what we have defined as countries in the motions at the state, and also about the rebuttals from the opposition, what they misunderstood about the government's case. First of all, they talked about acknowledging illegal activities, and it would increase, and we have to include those kind of illegal activities, but we believe those kind of illegal activities shouldn't be included in this motion because it's irrelevant, talking about how the state should ensure the right to access to the internet. And second, they talked about what about the developing countries who are in immediate help, who don't really need those kind of internet or those high-tech devices. But the government clearly mentioned and defined the state in the motion. We're talking about democratic states who has the fundamental basis on democracy principle, not those kind of developing countries who lack technology, who are not even democratic. And since they didn't their stance is that the government has a responsibility to restrict people from accessibility, and we believe the stance itself is so wrong and irrelevant to the motion. Because first of all, what the opposition should have done to the government is that since the government is challenging the status quo, meaning we are saying that we should ensure those rights to access to the internet, they should prove why it's not a right, not just saying that we should restrict people from accessing to the internet. First of all, we believe right to internet is already existing in the status quo, what the government is trying to change is that we have to ensure those rights to access to internet. And the opposition is having a wrong stance toward this motion, and therefore their stance is irrelevant, their cases, their rebuttals all fail. And before I go on to my third argument, I want to supplement my Prime Minister as talking more about the second argument about benefits of having a system with massive information. First of all, more opportunities of information happens because democracy works best when more citizens make best decisions for themselves. And in order to get those kind of best decisions, we have to go through the process of checking if go through a process of cost and benefits. And if we have more information, we are able to more capable to go through those kind of process. And the internet can provide those kind of information, which would further finally enable those kind of cost and benefit systems. And secondly, how it breaks down the wealth gap, which is actually solving the fundamental problem in this society, which is the reason why it's so important. That one of the biggest problems are ongoing wealth gap, especially in education and information gaining stuff. For example, rich people, even in debating, they go to academies, they have all of those private tutors who give those kind of information and write all those scripts to the people. And on the other hand, the debate tournaments such as Gwangju is kind of promoting those kind of poor students to get those information, and in this kind of process, they can gain more information and get those resources from the internet. And because it's so massive that we believe the gap can be covered by ensuring the rights to the students or people who are poor, and we believe this can actually solve a problem in the status quo, which is the huge gap between the rich and poor, which can be seen in a shallow example such as English debating. Lastly, I want to emphasize that it's practically impossible to match the closest equal opportunity in living. So we believe the internet is the most efficient and less costing way to give them and ensure their rights, and it would lead to further benefits. And now I want to go on to my third argument is about the global democracy. That we believe internet plays an essential role in achieving a world with less human rights. And having internet as basic right could make a much better place. And we believe this is so necessary, not just a luxury or an additional benefit, because it is a fundamental problem that we need to solve in this status quo. First of all, since there are two unique benefits that internet gives, and which kind of leads to the fundamental solvency. That first of all, internet gives fast and continuous access toward media. So because the people get just access to those internet, get those news, what's going on in the whole world, outside the world, and because of this, people would get information and they gather information about corrupted governments or other humanitarian crises in other countries, even though there are physical limitations. So because of this more awareness would lead to more effort of helping, such as donation, of forming and supporting and non-profit organization, government organization, and also secondly, pressure towards the government to do something, to take measures to solve the status quo, and therefore the internet is essential to achieve the democratic international society, or at least the world with less humanitarian crisis. And this kind of information, there might be a question that, what if the information is not accurate, or what if there is too much information, we can't know which is right, which is wrong. We believe we can compare those kind of media, various kind of media existing in the internet, and by comparing those we believe the internet has those kind of unique benefits that we can compare those information, which differentiates the internet from other media such as television or books. And also the second unique benefit from the internet is that because internet has a function of mutual communication, not only people gain information, they can spread information that they already gained. And why is this characteristic so important? Having more people attending to spread what's happening affects both the developed nation and the victimized countries whose democratic rights are violated. How? And within overall process of reciprocal communication, first, developed countries will spread out information more to other countries. Secondly, victimized countries get to actually know what this is, and this is why an unfair violation. And both the stakeholders would acknowledge the seriousness of the problem, which would lead to proper awareness and arousal of the status quo, which would lead to inner and external effort and movements to go against the problems. So we believe the state have to ensure the rights to access the internet, because it solves the fundamental problem and gives further benefits, unique benefits that internet only has. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Prime Minister. Now I'd like to welcome the Deputy Leader of Opposition to the podium.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Before I start, I would like to make some points about what the government side mentioned. First, you mentioned there are, how could it be sure that every citizen can make perfect decision? I think there is no reason you can find this. And are the information uploaded in the internet are all perfect and correct? You mentioned that this can be solved, this problem can, the problem of massive information can be solved by comparing the information by other things, but how? You never mentioned how we can compare those things. And I would like to make some rebuttals about the second argument. Isn't the massive information since the massive information might arouse some more problems for the nation and for the citizen, doesn't it cause more harms than benefit? And this will be further elaborated in my speech. So also, since the internet hasn't been spread universal, how is it universal enough to define it as a human right? I want to get some answers from the government side, and I would like to move on to my speech. There is two reasons I want to talk about why we're against that the state should ensure the right to access the internet. First, to protect citizens' privacy. As the internet develops, there are many side effects, and we, the opponent, would like to talk about privacy problem, which is one of the most serious problems among side effects. Humans' right to protect their own privacy is the most fundamental and should be most protected, most preserved right to be protected by the government. And this is also recommended by the law. And we, the opponent, strongly believe the right for protection of the privacy is more important than the right to access the internet. So let's pretend you're inside a room and you can't go out. You have two options. One, you can stay there without using internet, but your privacy can be preserved and protected. Second, you can use internet, but every single part of your life would be released on the online world. What would you choose? I think we must protect the citizens to protect their own privacy, rather than making sure their rights to access the internet. Second, I would like to talk about preserve of the nation. Some of the other nations have blocked sites which have different ideologies with their own nation have. And because the possibility of other ideologies aroused would threaten the national security. And even if the nation is a democratic society, the preserve of nation is more important than their rights to access the internet. And would the democratic society can be made without nation? No. So by these two reasons, our team strongly argue that the state should not ensure the right to access the internet, and we are proud to oppose. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Leader of Opposition. Now our next speaker is Government Whip. Please welcome her.
Why is internet such an important factor in the current society? Ever since the internet was invented, people have been relying on internet very strongly as a source of not only gaining information, but also communication throughout the society. They serve an important cause in the current status quo, and that is why, in fact, we want to pass this motion and to ensure that everyone in the world is ensured of this right. The government acknowledges that the access of internet is already existing in the both sense of access to information as well as mechanisms to get it forth, such as smartphones, but the government will prove to you why this right should be protected by the government. In the debate, the opposition has a burden to prove why simply access to a tool, to a right, cannot become a right, become a right, as well as proving that by making internet access a basic right will be harmful. There were mainly three questions that needed to be answered in today's debate. The first question is, does the government have the justification to ensure right to access? The second question is, can we enhance democracy by passing this motion? And lastly, what impact does it have to the global society as a whole? Throughout my speech, I'll prove to you why the government has been able to all of the questions clearly won the debate. Because there was no real strong argument coming from the opposition, I would like to talk about what they should have been mentioned and talked about and what is the core of the debate. Now, before I go on to my main clashes, I would like to answer the questions that the opposition gave us. Now, they gave us a question about how citizens will be able to know that information is true or false. However, we have explained in our previous speaker that because there are many sources on the internet, they will be able to compare the information, therefore get correct information. But secondly, they talked about how protecting privacy is much more effective and important in today's debate. However, what the opposition needs to realize is protecting privacy may be important. However, this is a characteristic of internet itself. Even if we give a right to access the internet, this will still be happening, and even if we don't, this will still be happening. Why? Because this is a characteristic of internet, not the right to access the internet. Now, because we have answered two questions given to us, I would like to go on to the main three questions. Firstly, does the government have a justification to ensure the right to access? Now, the opposition mainly said that the right to access information doesn't exist, but it's actually a civil right. They also defined internet as a technology to help us. We agree that internet is a technology to help us, but because it is a mechanism that is helping us so severely in today's society, we believe that this should be actually ensured as a right. The definition of a right can vary in situations and change in times. Even though we concede to the fact that basic rights exist, such as the right to sleep or eat, in this society where the people's quality of life is dependent on information so much, we see the necessary benefits. We see that the right to access internet should be provided and be provided from the government. We believe that by providing right to access internet will bring two benefits. The first, massive information will be able to give more opportunity to gain information. Democracy is most effective when a lot of opinion is incorporated because a lot of information leads to better costs and benefits. So there's more things to consider. Thus, when many people are able to get information better in democracy, we believe that it has a benefit. But secondly, we believe that the right to access information has a benefit because it can break down the wealth gap. The biggest problem in the society is the wealth gap and the vicious cycle of the poor staying poor and the rich getting richer. But we believe that the internet can reduce this gap because wealthy people are provided more opportunities beside the basic education. With the internet, we believe that more people will be able to get high quality of information using the internet. So we believe that because a large amount of information has a practical benefit to the whole society, we believe it should be considered as a right. Moving on to the second question about, can we enhance democracy by passing this motion? Democracy is important in today's debate because we believe the opposition should have said was because it is a democratic state, democracy should be prioritized and provided reasons of how access of information can actually harm the democracy in today's society. Because democracy is important and it should be considered the most important value these days. So we believe that by providing access to internet, we can enhance democracy. Because the definition of successful society in a democratic state is a society where democracy is activated. And in order to have an activated democracy, we believe a lot of people should participate actively. And this participation can be done by the mass access of internet. Why? Due to two reasons. The first reason, it's the biggest public discourse and the only way for the whole nation to participate. And it has diverse opinions that the internet provides, and it is the only way to close the ideal democracy. But secondly, we also believe that there is a right to freedom of opinion and expression, but in the status quo, this is getting violated because firstly, there's a physical limitation, but secondly, there's a social pressure. Because we believe that the access to the internet, the system allows improvement of democracy, and such beneficial factors should be considered a right. We believe we take this clash home. The last question is, what impact does it have to the global society as a whole? This question is important because the main benefit that internet can provide is it can exceed geological barriers, and what the opposition should have said that it was a harm to global society, and therefore we should not pass this motion. But we will provide why internet enables the role in achieving a world with less human rights violated and how it achieves democracy. Firstly, internet is fast and is able to access the media, and it's easy to know what is happening in other nations. They can overcome the geological barriers, and they can have more awareness towards the problem. But secondly, there are mechanisms such as SNS that enables more people to spread what's happening, and we believe that this will affect both developed and victimized countries, and we believe that it will have a huge impact globally. And due to these characteristics, it should be a right protected by the government. In the end of the day, the government has proven to you why the access to internet in a democratic state should be regarded as a right, but secondly, why they are such necessary benefits that it should be a right. It's because we have proven the burden given to the government, we will take this debate home. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, let's welcome the opposition whip to the podium.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you, Mr. and Madam Speaker. As an opposition whip, I would like to firstly give some rebuttals what the government side said. Firstly, the government side stated that the internet is beneficial because it can promote democracy and it can increase democracy. But however, I would like to question why the government, in their definition part, why they did excluded countries that have poor democracy. Like think about it. Like if the internet can increase and promote democracy, this can provide additional chances for these countries that have poor democracy to further develop into a country that have more democracy developed. So I would like to question first. And second, like they mentioned about the gap between rich and poor. But however, we would like to state that this is only arguable when the poor people have enough money and enough technology to access to these internets. And thirdly, I would like to question their argument. They stated that the more the information, the better. But however, I would like to question these points. Ladies and gentlemen, does it really mean that the quantity of information is should be most prioritized? In this 21st century, like rather than quantity, quality is more important. Like even if internet can provide a lot of information, quantitative information, if we don't have any ability or any criticism to take these informations, it is of no use. So their argument is totally wrong. No thanks. And also we would like to point out that the government has no example. It's just a huge assumption. They didn't provide any references and any examples that they can claim that that like the quantity of information can bring benefits to the internet. And so to move on to the main clashes of today's debate, there were mainly two clashes. First, the definition of right to access the internet, and second, the effect that the internet can bring to our society. Firstly, the government side stated that as internet is getting important and crucial in these contemporary society, they said that it should be defined as human rights. But however, we, the opposition side, are proud to point out that human rights and civil rights is fundamentally different. Human rights is a right that when a person born in this world as a human, they naturally possess these rights. But however, civil rights is defined as the rights that the government or other governments or other local states give to its citizens. When the people get its citizenship, the civil rights no thanks get these rights. So we the opposition sides argue that the right to access the internet is not a human right but civil rights. So firstly, the definition that the government gave is totally wrong. And secondly, so we take the first clash, and the second clash was, the government side stated that the massive quantity of information can bring benefits to the internet and our society. But however, we, the opposition side, argue that internet clearly has certain side effects, such as we stated about privacy issues. Privacy issue is still happening, but since the right to access the internet is emerging, since these rights are emerging, the privacy issue and invasion of privacy is getting aggravating. So the government missed this point. And to move on to the summary of our opposition side speakers' arguments, firstly, the leader of opposition stated about that a question about the definition of the right to access the internet, and we stated that these rights is not a human right, it's a civil right. And secondly, the deputy leader of opposition mentioned about the citizens' privacy issue, and thus these rights should not be ensured because we need to protect citizens' privacy. And lastly, the deputy leader of opposition stated that we should ensure national security because if the right to access the internet is so much ensured, this will pose threat to the national security. Therefore, today, we, the opposition side, clearly take this debate home. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll have the last speaker from the opposition side, the opposition reply to the podium.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. And as the last speaker of the leader of opposition, I would like to clarify why we won this debate and summarize simply what our arguments was. So, as our whip mentioned earlier, the government was really good at just pointing out why their argument is more clarified and more arguing, but we have to say that their arguments had no basis, and they were saying just mouthful of words, but they really didn't have any examples of the really examples. Like, they didn't even have the name of the country that the government has passed the law of protecting the citizens' rights to access the internet. And because of the mass of information, the citizens' lives have been much better protected, and the democratic society was built. So they didn't have any examples for that. And also, I'll move on to our summary. So first of all, as a leader proponent, I stated about the accessibility of rights. It's not a human right exactly, but it is a civil right. And civil right is something that the government and the citizen made together as a social contract. And this is very different from human rights because human rights has intrinsic right to be protected, but civil right doesn't have that right. So if the government thinks that it is harmful for the citizens, it can be restricted. And we think it is harmful because of the harmful and not beneficial because the massive information, and therefore there is a lot of invalid information, and those invalid information are because of the government's policy of accessibility to internet, there is too much exposure of that information, and therefore it can lead to the misunderstanding of that information for the citizens, and that can lead to negative results. Also, our second speaker talked about protecting the citizens' privacy. And we clearly think that protecting the citizens' privacy comes first, rather than just ambiguous accessibility to the internet that can bring no benefits to anyone. And thirdly, our second speaker talked about the side effects of the internet accessibility. And this is the end of our arguments. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we'll have the very last speaker from the government side and also the last speaker of this grand finals. The government reply to the podium.
As the last speaker from the government, I want to say that the government fulfill the duty of which is a burden of proof in this debate, and we clearly believe that we proved how we have necessary benefits, which is the main reason why we think that the state should ensure the right to access to the internet. And first, our stance was that why does access to the internet has to be right? Because we see rights as qualified when it has necessary benefits, and we believe necessary benefits comes when we solve fundamental problems, necessary problems that should be solved in the status quo. And we believe we clearly prove that by proving how we can solve the core problem in the status quo and its efficiency is necessary, we believe we take this debate home. What did we told you today? First of all, we told about since the state is defined as a democratic state, how at the first argument, I told you how it can enhance how the internet can enhance the democracy as being the most important principle in the democratic states as we defined, and we define successive society as in democratic states as society where there is activated democracy. Second, we talked about, by giving an example of Gwangju English Debating Championship, I told you how we can solve the problems such as covering the gap between rich and poor, and how we have qualitative and quantitative information coming into that process, and how we benefit. And thirdly, we also talked about the two unique benefits from the internet, that first of all, we can get information all worldwide, and second, we can also spread them back, and because of the process, we can get awareness, which would lead to better society, better international democracy. But the opposition, on the other hand, was wish-washing their stance. First, they said the government has a responsibility to restrict the access to internet. But they just came up and said we need to think about private issues. But rather, it's irrelevant to the motion, because even in the status quo, we have to risk those privacy issues, even no matter the government ensures their rights or not. And also, they talked about quality is more important than quantity, which we kind of engaged and rebutted to the point. Didn't get any answer from the opposition how we failed to prove that point. And we didn't even mention about should it be a human right or a civil right in return. We are just saying that because it has necessary benefits from our three arguments that we have stated. We believe the government has fully proved why the government has won, and we believe that opposition kind of failed to challenge the government's motion. And I want to give you a little example before I go into my seat. Do you know why internet is so important in the status quo? It's because there are too much people who need those kind of things, and because internet allows us to access to a whole lot of information which has a quality, and this is a core issue that we need to solve in the status quo. If we ensure internet, the democracy would increase, which is the necessary benefit. The whole societal problem will be solved by ensuring the internet. And also, at last, in a worldwide perspective, it would actually benefit the whole society. And because of the reasons, I'm so proud to propose to this motion. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is the end of the grand finals. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me congratulating them on their successful debate with a round of applause. Speakers may now cross the floor and shake hands. Thank you for your outstanding efforts, everyone. I'm really proud of you, and whether you win or not, you have already achieved a lot, and so I wish you all the best. Thank you very much.